in the chat, in the breakout rooms later today. And yeah, just let us know how you're feeling, or just feel free to write it down on the Post-it. So excited to dive in, and obviously some really quick like housekeeping items. So be respectful to each other. You know, I'm not sure if we need to say more there. Be respectful to each other in the chats. We're also having some breakout sessions. So yeah, and also be mindful that we're recording everything on Zoom. Use the Q&A setting to ask any questions throughout the event. Just interact with each other. Feel free to share that all in the chat, and being mindful that we are recording today's event. Yeah, so feel free to also interact with us on social, you know, hashtag, you know, Courage to Create, Women Tech Makers. Share some gems that you've picked up this weekend, anything that sort of like, you know, made you sort of continue thinking about what you've had the courage to create this year and what you have the courage to create going forward. Super excited to read what you all share there. Another disclaimer, we are recording. So Courage to Create is such a profound thing, right? To have the courage to create really innovative like solutions in your office, for your organization, or the courage to create justice and equality, which has been like a very heavy theme for most of us this year. So things to just sort of keep in mind as we go through. Whoops. Awesome. So we have a pretty amazing program this evening. Our first talk and our next talk is going to be on things they don't teach engineers at school by Ela Krepska, who's an engineering manager and tech lead at Google. And then we'll have a breakout session so we could connect and interact and engage. And then our second talk will be a workshop on confident communication skills and how to be heard in the virtual world by Leah Bonvissuto, who's a communications coach and a founder at Present Voices. And then we'll have another, you know, a smaller breakout session again, so we come together, just kind of share any reflections and connect. And then we'll be closing the event with a panel on collaborative leadership and leading with your whole selves. Super excited for that. And we'll be, like I said, that'll be our third event, but we'll be closing out with a raffle and prizes. Super excited for that. These are our amazing speakers tonight. You get to interact with them later today. Thank you to our amazing GDG organizers. None of this would have been possible without everything that you do in your communities, right? To make tech more inclusive and equitable. Shout out to all of you who have put in a lot of energy and effort to rallying our speakers, rallying our team. Thankful to be a part of that as well. Thank you to our sponsors. I'm going to pass it over to Linda, who's going to give a little bit more of a rundown on who they are and what they've have contributed towards this event.
So can everybody hear me? So if you are with us until the end, we will pass along a link for a form for you to fill out to be included in our raffle. We will offer to all our attendees Coursera free lifetime license from Atria Institute Technology. Also for all attendees, we will give a 30 days full access to whole library of O'Reilly. We will raffle 5 ebooks from O'Reilly. Also, we have from Practicum by Yandex 6 full scholarships to boot camps to choose from 2 to data analyst, 2 to data scientist, and 2 to web developer. Pat, also we have 4 ROI on-demand Google Cloud certification training for associate or professional cloud engineering. And I will pass it over to the others to present the sponsors.
Liz, would you like to go next?
Sure. We've got 4 Amazon gift certificates from Wellframe. They are a company in the Seaport area in Boston, automating healthcare at home, and they are hiring. So we'll come back to that a little bit later when we pick people to be the winners of the raffle, but you got to stay. You got to stay to the end. Ela, did you want to?
Yes, thank you, Liz. So we have Gazpacho offering a $50 Amazon gift card, and that will be raffled off at the end. Need to be here to win it.
And Anna?
Last one. Of course, everyone knows Women Take Makers is a Google supported organization. Our speakers are from there. Our groups are supported by them, and they provide 3 Google Nest Hubs for 3 lucky winners. So have to stick to the end.
Yay.
Amazing. As you know, it wouldn't be a G2G event without raffles, right? Prizes.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, you ladies. I know you put in a lot of work to get these sponsorships. So thank you again to our sponsors. Keep it coming.
We have only one disclaimer for the Nest Hubs. You have to be located in US, Canada, or India only due to shipping and custom issues. So only that.
Well, thank you for understanding.
Yeah.
Thank you. So on to our first talk. Do we have Ela Krepska with us?
Hi, can you hear me all?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, let's see.
Okay,
Hi.
so I need to present, right?
Yes, I could give
I
you.
spent whole morning figuring it out.
Thank you for being here, Ela.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, of course. You have such a fascinating background. Let's see. You
Oh, okay.
are able to
Okay,
present?
am I presenting?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
All right. Hi, everyone. I wish this was in person. I would make it a little interactive, but I think in this case, I'm gonna speak a bunch of time, and then I think I'm not gonna fill the whole slot, so we can have a Q&A. Also, I'll try to join some chat room. I try to do it in parallel, but I don't know. Maybe I'll reply later. Also, I'm available on email. Feel free to ping me. And you may hear a screaming toddler. Sorry. She got sick exactly on this day, and she's very whiny. My husband is with her, so don't worry. She's okay. She's just screaming. All right, so let's dive in. So in this talk, I will reflect on what engineering school teaches and how engineering job actually works in a place such as Google, and what it means to be successful at it. So this is the first time I'm showing this content, so I really welcome any feedback. I literally was editing a slide just a minute ago. So what are the things that surprised me in my career, 8 years at Google? And I wish someone told me earlier, 8 years ago, I think I would have been more effective and more prepared. So what happened 8 years ago? 8 years ago, I graduated from a university with a freshly baked PhD. This is a photo of me and my dad and my brother right after, on the day I defended my thesis through a total brain freeze. It was very tough. And I finished my education after I reflected 24 years of schooling of some sort. That seemed like enough. And I decided to leave academia and join Google. I've since worked on some product. You may heard about some of them. You may be user about some of them. I worked on Google Ads, Google Play, YouTube, AdMob, and actually much more that didn't fit the slide. I will not talk about these products. I will talk in general my conclusions about what it is that makes an engineer successful at a big company like Google. All right, first, what is successful to me? And this is not an absolute definition. It is like personal, and it is for the purpose of this talk. I'm happy to debate this definition, but it has to me 3 components. Number 1, it's when your code or product positively impacts users or other engineers or revenues. I spent 8 years doing all kinds of monetization products, so I care out for revenues, but that's maybe just my bias. Secondly, your work need to be excellent. To me, I want to be proud of my work, and that is part of happiness and success to me. And the last component, I want to build a reputation that makes other people want to work with me. This means collaborations will be easier. It means all kinds of good things come out of that. All right, so that's kind of roughly success. Somehow the first bullet point to me is most important, making impact. But like I said, it's not an absolute definition. Is someone saying something? Okay, I'll just move on. The first thing I want to talk is perfection. So this is counterintuitive. Why wouldn't we want to be perfect? Why wouldn't we want to build perfect product, write perfect code? In school, we are told perfection is great. The closer to perfection, the better the grade, the more successful you are in school. So you try to get the perfect score, the perfect attendance, the perfect answers. You try to follow the rules. You do all your homework. You hand in work on time. The more perfect you are, the better the school, the better the result. But this is not like engineering. That's not how engineering career works. It's much more complicated at work. So here's a few examples that at first glance, they sound good. And I tell you why I learned to discover that a lot of these are not so great. So first, you could say, I implemented all the features in my project. But you know the saying that 20% of work will bring you 80% of benefits? So I will claim that something like 20 to 50% of that, in that case, when you implemented everything, 20 to 50% was actually time really well spent, features that users are using, and the rest may not be so obvious. Maybe they are good for some other reasons than impact. Maybe you want to build excellent product. Maybe you build some features for small slice of customers that are important, or maybe they were not needed. Maybe your time would have been spent building a second project, and you would have two instead of one if you could spend half time building that project. So prioritization matters. Another example of perfect kind of statement is my code is maximally flexible. This is something actually I've experienced as a manager. For example, all objects have an interface. So if I have an object in the future, I don't need to, it's easy to plug it in. I will just make it implement my interface. What's wrong with that?
Basically, what I did, I found out how to like replace your webcam or something. That's my webcam, by the way. That's just my
Can
webcam.
someone mute about the web?
Oh, Ella, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, I'm back. There was some screaming. That
Yes,
was
there
not my
was.
toddler.
Thank you.
And no worries. So where was I? Why would something like that, implementing interfaces for everything, even if you just have one object, implementing an interface would not be ideal? Because you don't know the future. You may think you know the future, but you probably don't know the future. Unless you're the one making the future, you're a product manager, you probably don't know the future and you're over implementing useless features. I think I have like translation for the first one. You implemented unnecessary features. For the second one, you implemented overly complex, too long code. And the last one, example, implemented perfect performance. So maybe you optimized the hell out of some loop. Was it time well spent? Maybe that loop is not on a critical path of users. Maybe that loop is something that user does not even perceive as valuable optimization. So you have to always prioritize and make sure that what you're doing has impact, has good value, rather than trying to be perfect. All right. So conclusion on perfection. You don't want to try to be perfect. You want to try to be fast and good enough. As long as you don't compromise quality, velocity will trump perfection. And good mantra that I always try to remember: don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In practice, this means doing high priority work first. And this sounds very easy, but actually I found in practice it's this hard for two reasons.
Ella?
Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt you. If you could just reshare your presentation, because I think it.
Oh, it's gone? All right, we'll get through it.
Yeah, thank you.
What do I do? The sharing button disappeared.
I think it's removed now.
Just a sec. I think someone raised hand. Does someone want to have ask a question? Emmanuel? Okay, I'll just move on. We'll do questions later. All right, so don't be perfect, be good enough and fast. That's far better combo. And why it is hard to prioritize? Number one, it is often hard to know the priority of your work. To know the priority, you need to know the roadmap, the product really well, maybe the competition. You have to collaborate with your product managers, with sellers. So it is non-trivial sometimes to know priority of your work. And secondly, even if you know the priority of your work, your human brain conspires against you to pick the easy, comfortable work over a hard, impactful work. So that's why it's hard, and you have to get better by training that muscle. And last point that I wanted to make is that school teaches lots of rules, like encapsulate everything. Never duplicate code. Who would ever duplicate code, right? Not heard of, right? It's always wrong. No. For every rule, there is a case when it needs to be broken, and a senior engineer knows when to break the rules. For example, there is one case when code duplication is actually desired. It's in tests. For tests, unit test readability, you often duplicate a whole bunch of codes to have a nice, clearly defined tests when preconditions are set up and conditions are checked. Cool. Someone's raising the hand. Am I supposed to do something?
No, you're fine, Ella.
All right.
We'll look at questions towards the end.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes my first point. I think I have like 5 of these like advices. Number 2, right. Building products, it's not the same as coding. So what I thought, this is the picture of what I thought life will look like after I joined Google. That was my assumption. I will spend 100% of time coding. Maybe I take a lunch break. Maybe I check some emails, but I will mainly code. Okay, this is really, really wrong. So my first surprise was testing. So first of all, testing takes a lot of time. You will never implement properly, especially if it's a mature product. If it's a startup and you're just hacking, maybe you won't do it. But if it's a mature product, like we have at Google, you need to have a really good coverage of tests to avoid regressions. So I found that if you're testing maybe like a small stateless function, that's super easy. But if you're testing typical code, it takes you double the amount of coding to ask the test. And sometimes you will write one line change and you spend all day testing it just because you have to mock everything in a complicated distributed systems. So testing can be huge, huge tasks. And I never appreciated that in school. And secondly, the thing that happens in school a lot is you write a project, you complete it, you submit it, you get a grade, you get your A, and then you abandon it. No one ever has to maintain it, but at work, you typically will maintain your own code. You will write a new V2 features. And if you did poor job testing, you will suffer from it. Or someone else who will take over from you. So the next surprise after testing was design. So guess what? Systems that have hundreds of collaborators, like it is at Google, do get complicated. Code bases become huge. So changing something in a huge code base with a lot of collaborators takes a plan. You have to have a good plan, good design, and review from senior folks. To do the good design, you have to know a lot of technical leads, you have to debate, discuss a lot, you have to get reviews. So meetings start cutting to your time, and you spend a big chunk of time actually designing. And secondly, I realized that unit testing is not the end of work. In fact, that's kind of the beginning. So unit tests miss things all the time. You need to do integration testing to test component to component, and you need to test, probably need a global test to test everything from customer point of view. And finally, even if you test, the next thing is, there's no like one launch. There's a lot of A/B testing. You launch something, you unlaunch because it didn't work out, you launch something else, you ramp it up. For example, in a product like YouTube, when you have 2 billion users, you don't just launch, just press a button. You launch in a very controlled step-by-step manner, maybe like 0.1% and 1% and more, every time watching health and watching performance metrics. And even if you take all these precautions with testing and launching and safety, you still get outages. So you need monitoring, you need alerting, dashboards, and you need to handle escalations. So coding is the core of it, but it is smaller core, you can see. And the next surprise after this, at some point you have a few projects under your belt, end to end, you launch them, you're so good at this. You naturally start to advise other people how to build products. And half of your time, at least, will start to go to reviewing other people's work, other people's code, and other people's design. And you're probably some kind of formal or informal technical lead role at this point. What happens next? You broaden your horizons even more. So the next surprise, and I think this is kind of last one, is understanding the product, understanding why we're building what we're building, why we made certain choices. To do that, you need to collaborate with product managers to contribute to product requirements. You need to understand your market, your competitors, understand the mocks, the designs. You have to understand compliance. So work with legal team, and you have to understand product roadmap, where you want to take the product. How do you schedule features? Which one do you build first? And of course, building is not the end of the story. You have to sell the product, make some money, or make some happy users. So you have to work with your sales teams, with the go-to-market team. You probably need to work with your customers and help them implement your solution. You probably have to analyze data and make improvements to your product, right? So see what this happened to me over, let's say, 5 years. My story continues. I become a manager. Coding became from 100 to tiny box and actually disappeared for me when I become manager and no longer code. So that's my point. That building products is not just coding. This is what I taught in school, so naively. There's a really good book that I can recommend, Mythical Man Month. It's from 1975, so this is a 40 or 50-year-old book. The language is outdated, but the points are really relevant. So even there in 1975, Frederick Brooks says, in his experience, project code takes 1/6 of time. Planning takes 1/3 and testing about half. I think maybe testing is a little less right now, but still a significant part. So just to sum up, as my tip is to keep reinventing your work, because you know that you are learning and growing if your job meaningfully, qualitatively changes every few years. So one time you find yourself contributing, launching some product, few years later, you find yourself reviewing other people's launches. That's qualitative change, that's growth. And that's kind of like a new job. So every few years, you reinvent yourself. And signals to watch out for when you're feeling comfortable and bored, basically when you know what to do, it feels so good, you know exactly what steps to take, it's time for a change. All right, so that was a conclusion of the second advice. Number 3 is knowing what to code. So that's something that never even occurred to me in school. I was all about coding algorithms and you know, your AVL balancing and your red-black trees. But actually, why would you ever want to use a red-black tree or AVL code? That's important. Okay, so have you ever thought about how much code is out there? I pulled some numbers from the internet, and I pulled from some famous projects. So you can see projects on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, you can see lines of codes in million on a log scale. So for example, Windows 10 is 50 million line of code. Google in 2015 had 2 billion line of code. I don't know the number, but it's gotta be more. So my point is, for example, for Windows 10, I did this math. One person, let's say averagely productive, 300 line of code per day, will need 630 years or 8 lifetimes to write Windows 10. So there is a ton of code out there, and that's just one system. And similarly, I pulled from Fortune 500 top US tech companies by number of employees. Maybe they don't own code. Not all of them code, but it's probably proportional, I would guess. So you can see the Alphabet, for example, had 119,000 employees coding. So what I'm getting at is that there is so much code, there is a sea of code, but there is no shortage of code, but there is a shortage of knowing what to code. There is an order of magnitude fewer technical leads and managers and product managers, because knowing what to code is the more valuable skill and the skill you want to grow. So good execution at Google is table stakes, and you will stand out as an engineer if you understand the product and can answer the why and the what next question. Right. And next, I want to talk about waterfalls. So what is a waterfall? Waterfall is a traditional approach of building products where you have a product manager are the smart guys and girls in the room who have all the bright ideas. They write product requirements. Then they hand it off to a designer. Designer designs a mocks. Then they hand it off to the engineer. Engineer plans how to build it, builds the code, and then we make a lot of money because we sell the product. Okay, this is theory. This is this pipeline, and good projects absolutely don't work like this. Only in some high-level approximation, yes. So what happens in real life? In real life, you will start designing and you will find a problem with the product requirements. You'll find, for example, you cannot build something, or you will find some UX component is just too expensive to build in a time frame. You're given a quarter and you need you cannot spend this quarter building one component for like 2 months. So you already have to go revisit the requirements. Then you have the design, you're coding. And when you're coding, you find something. Oh, some migration is going on, some components not available, something is mismatching, and you have to search something is not possible. Again, you go revisit and design, and engineering design, and which means revisiting requirements. then you're not done at all, because you're doing testing and your collaborating sellers do sales. And then they maybe find the problem. Maybe one customer first, your alpha customer, implemented your solution and they find a problem. You go revisit your engineering design, you go revisit your code, you maybe go revisit your product requirements. So this pipeline just doesn't work. It's nice in theory. In practice, I think about developing products as a collaboration where there is kind of an order like that, but there is everyone can look at everything. So your role is your starting points. You keep an affinity to it, but you behave like an owner of the whole product. So you need to do anything and everything that's required for the product to be successful at some point. For example, hey, your designer is on leave. You jump in and you do design. Maybe it won't be so perfect, but you will unblock the project and the design can be polished later. The same with the requirements. Your product manager quit and we're hiring a new one and it takes time and there's no one. What do? You jump in and you draft the requirements. Maybe you won't do a perfect job, but you will unblock the project. So velocity over perfection. Oh, I see. Signals to watch out for. Typical things that I hear from junior folks. Thinking about bothering other people. Like, I want to find all the solutions. I don't want to bother my team. You are not bothering. You are collaborating. So when you think yourself all blaming, oh, we are delayed because the designer didn't deliver on time. Or designer had to revise. If you find yourself saying such things, you probably should think about ownership of the project and what you could have done to help the designer not have to revise the design and stuff like that. So you want to behave like an owner. And most importantly too, everyone can contribute ideas. Project managers are humans, not gods. They don't know everything. They are good, but they don't know everything. And ideas come from engineering, from design, from researchers, from sellers, from everyone. Good ideas. So the project will really benefit if everyone behaves like an owner. Cool. Next point I want to make is about external factors. So what's an internal versus external factor? Internal factors are like your skills, your abilities, your knowledge and your experience, project you've launched, you've completed. And external factors are things like where you choose to work, who is your, what area, what product, your team, your manager, and your project. And when I started at Google, I was very sure internal factors matter the most. If I can build the best code, I will be the most successful. That's totally not true. Now, with every year, I keep thinking that external factors matter more and more. So what does this mean to us, to engineers? It means that we not only need to get good at coding, but also at picking the right team, picking the right manager, picking the right company with a good culture. And this is tricky because there is no objective criteria, like what's a good manager? Like, it depends. I think I give some examples in a slide, in the next slide. Right. So here's a hypothetical question. If we had a interaction, we could have done show of hands, but just think to yourself and ask me questions at the end. What would you rather do? Work on a great product with a bad manager, like someone you know for some reason is bad manager, or would you work on a bad product, maybe it's not selling, with a great manager? Right, so the right answer to this question is that there is no right answer. It really depends. It depends on your goals. Maybe, for example, you want to learn Python. So it doesn't really matter which projects you pick, as long as it's Python project. It will depend on your personality. Maybe you want to deeply research a certain area, or maybe you want to just quickly launch something and increase revenues, right? That's very different. You would pick a very different team, very different area for this. It will depend also on your circumstances. For example, maybe you're just starting a career and a good manager is the most important thing to you at the beginning of your career. So how to deal with external factors? Just to summarize, there is no objective advice, but there is advice for your personal situation, personal preference. For example, in the beginning of career, as I mentioned, you want to, so coming back to this question of, do you want a good manager and on a bad project, or bad projects on a good project with a bad manager? It really depends. And for example, if you're in the beginning of your career, you may want to prefer a good manager. If you're at a later stage of your career, maybe you likely want to have the manager who let go and stop micromanaging, stop telling you what to do. And then even later, what you need is a charismatic leader who will motivate you. So it really, the answers depend on the personal choices and temporary circumstances. These answers will actually keep changing as you go through your career. The point that I want to make is that be aware this is important. And look for answers with intention. And no one actually knows these things at the beginning of their career, maybe even later too. These are hard to know. So it's just hard to know what you want in some sense in your career, like that dreaded question, what do you want to do 5 years from now? That doesn't make much sense. No one knows. No one knows. Maybe like if you're very later stages, but in general, you don't know. So what you want to do, you want to periodically think about it and make epsilon improvements, make some course corrections to go towards what you want and figure out over time what you want. And my last point, I think very quickly, advocating for yourself. So this took me a few years to realize, I have to admit. People at Google are extremely smart, well-intentioned, extremely helpful when asked. This is true. They are just amazing people. This is the best company I ever worked for. But it's also true that everyone cares for their career first. So how many people wake up in the morning and think, what Ela should do in her career? Like no one. Maybe me, maybe not that often. Maybe my manager sometimes, maybe a good mentor, but it's very scarce. So who needs to be in charge of what has to happen in your career? You have to be. And I found it the hard way for something like 2 years. I was just complaining every day about a lot of things and kind of waiting for guidance. I thought my manager would tell me exactly what I need to do in my career. And my manager would at best ask me questions what I want to do. So it took me long time to realize that I need to be in charge of my career. I need to figure out what I want. No one will ever tell me. So I need to figure out what skills I want to require and what kind of growth I am looking for. Once you know what you want, then you ask your mentors and manager for help to getting there. So this is a huge topic, advocating for yourself. So I just want to mention one thing, and that workshop is about communication. That's a perfect complement to this point. Speaking with confidence. So one of the most useful thing that I've done is use the Gmail's undo feature. So it's up to 30 seconds to reread the email, and you can cancel it and resend it again. I do this all the time. Cancel and edit something. So I look for the self-undermining language that comes kind of, I don't know from where, but I find myself saying these things. Maybe perhaps we should consider, or this is a silly comment, or this is such a silly question, or this is such a noob question. Probably stupid, but like, why don't we? I'm sorry to this. So I find myself typing these things all the time. And then in the 30 seconds, I delete, and say instead, let's do X. Or my idea is to do Y. What do you think? So that's about advocating. And there is a ton of materials on the subject, and I'm happy to talk more about this. And I think this is my last slide. This is the summary. Happy to answer any questions.
Hi, Ella. That was so great. Lots of gems. I was writing some things about, obviously encouraging us to break the rules, right? To test different things out. And I really love this one thing that you said, that you're not bothering someone, you're collaborating. And I think, I want to sit with that. It's very powerful. And it's also going to be the theme of our next talk, right? Collaborative leadership. And I think that's very, very, very important. So we have a few questions. I will.
Where do I look? Should I open the chat?
I could read them to you, or if you want to read them.
Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
So someone asked, do you miss coding after leaving it all together? How do you stay up to date? Yeah. How do you stay up to date?
I do, but I tell you something. There was a moment in my career when it was a clear switch from coding to being a leader. I launched externally at Google I/O something very big, and like the day earlier, it was a very visible project. So I talked to my VP, and he's like, "Ella, just don't leave." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? This is so exciting! We're launching tomorrow." And then launch comes, an hour after, I'm like, "This is boring." Like, I've launched this big thing. It took like 2 years, and it was very long and hectic, and we make it last minute. Everything was happening, and we barely made it. And he was so right. Like, the moment after you do that, you feel, oh, this is no longer interesting. What's the next hard problem? And then, the next hard problem is too big for me to code. It's like, if you try to code, yes, it's nice, it's rewarding in the moment, but you feel like you're just this one person. What can you do in one? You need to have a few people do it with you, and then it will be big. So it becomes, yes, I miss it, but also I don't, because I know I can have much more influence if I figure out what's the right thing to do and I collaborate with my engineers.
Oh, so many good questions. I could read them a couple to you, and then you kind of decide which ones you might want to answer.
All right.
So someone said earlier, you said something about not letting the perfect be your enemy. So does this also mean not compromising the quality of your project to some degree? If yes, why?
Oh, and why? Then, yeah. If you compromise quality, then you're a shitty engineer. So don't compromise quality. The tough part is to figure out what doesn't matter, what you don't want to do. This is thinking outside of the box. You try to cut corners, but those corners that don't matter, right? Not every corner. Something like, so it's a really prioritization exercise. But stay high quality. Okay. So I don't know who asked this, if they have a follow-up to this. The way I think about this, and I tell my people, you don't want to work more hours because that doesn't scale. You want to be more effective per hour, okay? So you want to grow your impact every hour. And if you spend an hour coding something useless or something that's like nice, but who cares? You could have done something better with that time, right? So you want to optimize your time, not increase the amount of time.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, is agile method the better model? I see many companies having that in their job requirements. Why is it better than Waterfall, and why do most companies go for it?
We actually don't use it at all. Very rarely at Google. No one does agile. I don't. Like, I have a strong point of view on this. So it depends. There are projects where agile is appropriate. I would say it's appropriate when you know very well what to do. Like the challenge of what to do is small, and it's just like, here's a big pile of work. Hey, let's pick it up and let's monitor and let's predict when it's gonna land. Great. A lot of project problems that I deal with, they are hard. The stack is of ads. I work a lot in ads. 20-year-old stack, 10,000 people working on it. Okay, is complicated. It has so many backends. So to do something, the challenge isn't to like spread around work. The challenge is to assign owners to problems, and then you own this problem, and like you only become an expert in this problem and you will implement it. Like there's agile model doesn't work in my area.
That might be a surprise to some.
Oh, really? Yeah, it depends. Yeah, no, Google, no agile. It exists. Some teams do, but very few.
What do you call these?
Someone's asking?
Okay, so, and then, let's see, another question. How can you identify a good manager, and how can you identify the best team without any prior experience?
Why did I think someone will ask this? I have an extra slide. I thought someone will ask this.
Screenshot that. People.
It is very hard, and you get better at this. And there is like, so think what you want in your manager and think what kind of question you want to ask them. So basically interview your manager and interview people he or she manages. That's the TLDR of it. And think, what's the smart questions to ask? What do you want to hear from him? What do you want the manager to be like? What is the question? And how do you gauge response? For example, if you want a manager who cares for your career and you ask what kind of projects they have in mind for you, they will be like, it's like C++, and like they jump right into this, and it uses this microservice and uses this technology. Hey, you didn't ask technology, you asked growth. So your manager need to respond with, oh, I think I'll give you a small starter project, and you will learn to collaborate, and I will also make you give you opportunity to present your work. And I think a year from now, you should land this project. And based on that, I would expect you will, a conversation need to be like that, not technical. So that's like one. So you get better at this kind of how to interview your manager. It's a skill. So I wrote some questions like what I would do. For example, I check if teams are diverse. If everyone looks the same, is to me at least big red flag. And that's not just women. It's like across the board. You want diversity. That means that it's a good manager because people come there. And if it's just one type of person, whatever that is, even just women, and something is weird, then you want mix. If the team is too big, no human can manage like really well over 10 people. You just don't have capacity for it. So if you have a manager with 20 people, they will never have time for you. Okay, so you need then a mentor or some solution, because over 10 people, they never have time. Some research shows that the line is 7, let's say 7. I put it at 10, let's say, but more, it's becoming a scale. No, if you have more, then you have to have like a small mentor who works with you day to day. And a lot of other questions.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to go. I don't want to monopolize on this one question. So
yeah, I guess the last one, let's see. This is an interesting question. It says, love the Mythical Man Month. What's something you think would come in the book if it was released again today?
I don't get the question.
Oh, apologies. There's some shuffling around here. Okay. This might be related to what you were just speaking about. So how do you convince your boss and company to find a product manager when you don't have one and they insist we don't need it, but it makes work kind of hard?
I've been in such situations. That's hard. I mean, you need to advocate. You need to make a point very well why you need a product manager to basically fund a role in your horizontal team that you're missing. And it doesn't have to be product manager. There can be, I've seen very infra-focused teams without product managers. They sometimes don't perform that well. And I've seen cases where you're missing a certain link in your in your kind of circle of collaborators. I say sometimes this, you know what I've learned is, it just takes some evangelizing and some time. You cannot expect that you go to your VP and like, hey, I need X, hire person X in one day. But guess what? That VP will remember. And then you complain next quarter or something, and then one more, and you know what? This will materialize. If you have arguments, the expectation isn't like immediate. Once they can make it, they will make it if it's a reasonable request, right? That's kind of my take.
Great, thank you. I think that's about all the time we have for this talk. Really appreciate you making the time to come talk with us. Thank you so much, Ella. Hopefully you could stick around. We're going to jump in.
I will a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah. Feel free to send me feedback. Let me go back to that's my email.
Perfect.
I'm happy to get feedback more. I see more questions. Feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you. Virtual claps.
Thank you.
So let's see. I am going to jump back on to presenting.